There's a man standing outside a house at night. Music is playing inside. People are dancing, and he will not go in. You know this story. You've heard the prodigal son parable 100 times. The son who left, wasted everything, and came home. But that story, you know, ends at the party. This story doesn't. It ends out here, with a second son the sermon usually skips, and it never tells you if he goes inside. Here's the claim this video is going to prove. The prodigal son was never a story about leaving home. Both of these men, the one who left and the one who stayed, are not two separate people. They're two things your own mind does. And the proof isn't a theory. It's sitting in the Greek text, in a phrase almost every translation quietly softens. By the end, you'll see it yourself. You won't need to take my word for it. This isn't wordplay or a New Age reading. It's the actual Greek Luke wrote, and you can check it yourself, so forget the ending you already know. Start where the story actually starts, with a father, two sons, and one word he uses to describe what he's about to hand over. The father in this story has two sons, and before either one does anything else, Luke tells us what the father does. He divides his life between them, not his money, his life. The Greek word is bios, the root of our word biology. It can mean a person's livelihood, their means of living, but it's also the plain Greek word for life itself. This story uses that word on purpose. A father does not usually divide his life. He divides an inheritance. Luke chose the bigger word. The younger son takes his share and leaves for what the text calls a far country. There's something the parable never gives you. A name. This country does not. That's notable for a storyteller this attentive to detail. Luke is usually careful and precise about geography elsewhere in his gospel. He names towns, regions, and roads throughout his account. Real journeys in his gospel tend to go to real, named places. This one doesn't. Leaving this destination blank looks less like an oversight and more like a choice. And what does he do there? The text says he wastes his property. But the Greek word underneath property is ousia, and outside this story, ousia is a serious word. It's the word Greek philosophers used for being itself, for substance, for what a thing actually is at its core. Read that way. The son isn't described as running out of cash. He's described as scattering his own substance in a country with no name. The verb for waste is diascorpizo. It means to scatter, the same word you'd use for scattering seed to the wind. There's one more word here most translations skip past. The text says he joined himself to a citizen of that country. In Greek, ekolethe literally glued himself to. He didn't just wander into a country with no name. Something in him bonded to it, attached itself there. Scattering your essence doesn't have to mean losing money. For a lot of people watching this, it looks like years of attention glued to things that leave nothing behind when the account finally runs dry. Everything runs out eventually, and a famine hits the country with no name. The son ends up feeding pigs for a stranger, which for the audience listening to this story would have been about as low as a person could sink. He's hungry enough to envy what the pigs are eating. Nobody gives him anything. Starving and alone, something happens to him. And this is the moment almost every sermon skips past on the way to the road home. Luke writes a specific phrase here. In Greek, it's eis hauton de elthon. Most English Bibles translated he came to himself, or he came to his senses. That's a fair translation. But look at what the words actually build. Eis means into. Hauton means himself. The most literal reading of this phrase is that he came into himself. Read the sentence again with that in mind. The text doesn't say he decided to go home, and then, somewhere on the road, started to feel different. It says the coming happened first, inside him, while he was still sitting in the mud with the pigs. He hadn't taken a single step yet. The direction had already changed before his feet did. That changes what the rest of the story is actually about. If the return already happened before he moved, then the walk home isn't the transformation. It's what the transformation looks like from the outside, once it's already true on the inside. And look at what he actually thinks first. Once he comes into himself, not shame, not a spiral of guilt, a plain, clear thought. His father's hired workers have more than enough to eat, and he's out here starving. Coming into yourself in this story doesn't look like an emotional collapse. It looks like clarity. And this isn't an isolated reading either. Outside the Bible, in other Greek writing, this same kind of phrase, coming to oneself, shows up as an idiom for a person regaining their right mind after some kind of breakdown. Luke is using ordinary language for an ordinary human experience. Waking up to yourself after losing yourself for a while. You can check it yourself tonight in any interlinear Greek New Testament. That's the method this channel runs on, not asking you to trust a conclusion, but showing you exactly where to look so you can test it. If that's useful to you, subscribing helps more of these land in front of people asking the same questions. Either way, keep watching, because the pigsty isn't where this story turns. It's where it started turning, and there's a much harder scene still ahead, one that shows the other half of what your own mind is doing right now. So he gets up and starts walking, rehearsing a small speech the whole way. He's going to tell his father he's not worthy to be called a son anymore, and ask to be treated like one of the hired workers instead. It's a careful, humble little speech. He never finishes it, because while the son is still a long way off, the father sees him first and does something no respected elder in that culture would do. He runs. Men of status in that world did not run in public. It was undignified. The father does it anyway, and Luke tells us why. He was moved with compassion. The Greek word behind compassion here is splanchnizoomai. It comes from splanchna, which literally means the inward parts, the gut. The father's response isn't described as a polite decision. It's described as something that moved in him low in the body before it ever reached his feet. That's not just an ancient way of talking. Modern neuroscience describes something similar. The gut contains an extensive network of neurons, often called the enteric nervous system, in constant communication with the brain. And gut sensation is now a recognized part of how emotion is actually felt in the body. The ancient word and the modern research are pointing at the same territory of the body, two very different sources landing in the same place. The son starts his rehearsed speech. He gets through the part about not being worthy. He never gets to finish the part where he asks to be made a servant. The father is already calling for a robe. One detail is worth noticing. The Greek pairs the word for robe with proten, the word for first. Most translations read that as first in rank, the best robe, the finest one kept in the house. That's a fair reading, and it fits what's happening. This isn't some spare garment handed over as an afterthought. Along with the ring and the sandals, this isn't a reward for good behavior. It's a restoration of a status that was already his to begin with. The ring specifically carried authority in that world, the kind of signet used to seal documents in a household's name. It's not sentimental jewelry. It's his place in the family, handed back to him whole. And if the story ended here, with the party starting, this would be a video about a son who left home and came back. That's the version almost everyone already knows. But this story doesn't end at the party. There's a second son, and everything you've heard about this parable has probably left him out. He's the one this video is actually about. He's the other movement your own mind makes, the one almost nobody names. The older son has been out working the fields all day. He didn't leave for a far country. He never left at all. On his way back, he hears music and dancing before he even reaches the house. So he stops one of the servants and asks what's going on. His brother is home, the servant says, safe and healthy, and the father has thrown a party to celebrate it. The older son does not go inside. He stands there, furious, refusing to walk through his own front door. The Greek word for his reaction is orgisthi, real anger, not mild annoyance. The text doesn't soften it, and it doesn't rush to correct him for feeling it either. The story's problem with the older brother is never that he got angry. It's what he does next with that anger. If you've ever done everything right at work for years, watched someone else coast in and get the promotion anyway, and felt that specific ugly little flame of unfairness light up in your chest, you already know this man. He is extremely easy to recognize. So the father does something he already did once tonight. He goes out. First to the younger son on the road, now to the older one, standing in the dark, refusing to come in. Both times, the father is the one who moves first. And the older son finally says what's actually been sitting in him. In Greek, his words are direct. All these years I douleo you. The word means to serve as a slave, not as a son helping his father, but as property working for a master. He goes on. He's never once gotten so much as a young goat to celebrate with his own friends, but the moment this son of yours shows up, after wasting everything, out comes the fattened calf. Watch how the father answers this one, because it's about to matter for the part of you that's still standing in the field too. The father doesn't argue with the anger. He answers with something quieter, and this is where the story's clearest correction happens. Notice the language shift. The older son called his brother this son of yours, distancing himself from him entirely. The father's reply uses a different word. He calls the younger son this brother of yours. One sentence pulls the relationship apart. The next one puts it back together. Then the father says the line this whole story has been building toward. Child, you are always with me, and everything that is mine is yours. In Greek, panta ta ema sa estin. All that is mine is yours. Remember the word from the very beginning of this story, the one used for what the father divided between his two sons, his bios, his life. That's the same life on the table again right now, just in a different word. He's not repeating a word, he's repeating an offer. It was never a question of whether the older son had access to everything. He always did. He just never once asked for the fattened calf. He served instead of asking. Look at who Jesus is actually telling this story to. Luke tells us right at the start of the chapter, before either son ever shows up. Pharisees and scribes grumbling that Jesus welcomes sinners and eats with them. This is the third story in a row Jesus tells that group that day, after one about a lost sheep and one about a lost coin. It also helps to notice what this story is the third of. A sheep doesn't know it's lost. A coin definitely doesn't. But a son knows exactly what he did, and he still doesn't turn around until he's got nothing left. Jesus tells 3 stories about the same shape of grace and saves the hardest, most human version for last. Notice something else. The lost sheep parable has no angry brother in it. Neither does the lost coin. The older brother only shows up in the third story, the one about the 2 sons. Jesus didn't need him for the first 2 parables to make their point. He built an entire extra character just to make this one. The older brother in this story is a portrait of the men standing right there listening to it. People who never left, who kept every rule, and who resent the idea that someone who didn't gets the same welcome home. This method of reading scripture from the inside, as a map instead of a straight historical record, didn't start with this channel. Bill Donahue was teaching this approach for years, showing that these old stories describe something happening in a person right now, not just something that happened to someone else long ago. This video is standing on ground he cleared first. And that's where the story stops. Not one more verse. No line telling you whether the older son finally walks through that door or turns around and goes back to the field. The most famous storyteller in the Bible ends his most famous story without an ending, which is a strange choice, unless he did it on purpose. Here's why. Both of these sons were never two different people. They're two things every mind does. One part of you is the younger son, the part that goes looking for what it thinks it's missing out in the world, scattering its own attention and energy in a far country with no name until it's empty enough to finally turn around. Another part of you is the older son, the part that stays close to everything good, keeps every rule, does everything right, and still somehow never walks through the door into the actual joy that was sitting right there the whole time. And the father, the one who divided his own life into both of them, the one who ran to one son and walked out into the dark for the other, is the part of you underneath both movements. Still there. Still saying the same thing to whichever one is listening. Everything I have is already yours. That phrase from earlier, came into himself, describes a real, learnable skill, not just a Bible moment. Scientists call it interoception, simply noticing what is happening inside your own body, your heartbeat, your breath, the tightness in your stomach when something's wrong. So the practice is small on purpose. Sit still for 2 minutes, slow your breathing down, and notice one thing happening inside your body right now, without fixing it or explaining it away. You are not just calming down. You are training the same turn this story describes. The door in this story is still open. The music is still playing. And the father is still standing there, asking. The only thing Luke never wrote down is which one you are tonight. The one still walking home, or the one still standing outside. That part was always going to be yours to finish. If you have ever wondered why some people can do everything right and still end up standing outside, there is a specific answer the Bible gives, and it has nothing to do with sin. That is the subject of another Decode on this channel. It is called Most Can't Enter the Narrow Gate, and it's not sin, and it picks up almost exactly where the older brother in this story is left standing.